A bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to prohibition on certain local government mandates upon employers. Reported for the Committee on Counties, Cities, and Towns.
The gentleman asks us, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this House bill will basically prohibit local government, cities, or counties to mandate employers provide a higher wage or benefits that go above what the Commonwealth of Virginia allows. We do have a couple jurisdictions in the Commonwealth of Virginia that are doing this, and I move that the bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my speak button working. It doesn't. So, will the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield? Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the gentleman if he can tell us how many of these kind of ordinances are out there by local governments that he's concerned about.
Mr. Speaker, no, I can't tell him that.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for another question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll yield.
Gentleman yields.
So I'm assuming you're trying to address some kind of problem. Are you aware that there may be a number of contracts already out there that localities have signed with vendors for janitorial services, park services, snow plowing services that might, in effect, pay greater than the minimum wage?
I would assume they do, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for another question?
I'll yield.
Yield. Gentleman yields.
What would be the gentleman's opinion about whether this bill, if it's passed, would void all those contracts as being unenforceable?
Mr. Speaker, that would not be my concern at all. My concern is that we do have localities such as Charlottesville, the Gentleman's District, and Alexandria, maybe a couple others, that are requiring that private contractors have higher wage requirements in their contracts or higher benefit requirements in their contracts than what the Commonwealth of Virginia has in statute. What I would say, Mr. Speaker, is that it's this body. First of all, I'm disappointed that we actually have to bring this bill forward because I would believe that the Dillon rule would prevent localities from doing this. The fact of the matter is there are some localities doing it, and we have an attorney general who I very seriously would doubt would ever considering suing those localities to stop this practice. Mr. Speaker, the reason I'm bringing this bill forward is to make sure that there's an equal playing field for employers across the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Dillon rule is one of the reasons why we are a good state to do business in, if not a great state to do business in. And I would go on to say, Mr. Speaker, that this bill will also protect the taxpayer of said districts.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for another question?
I'll yield.
Will the gentleman yield? Gentleman yields.
So, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, so is he saying to this body that if a city or a county issues a request for proposals for a bid for janitorial service or park services or whatever, and the bids come back, and the lowest bid pays the employee $10 an hour, would he oppose that?
Mr. Speaker, I would not impose that. I would oppose localities requiring contractors to have salaries that are above the minimum wage of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
One final question, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yield.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield to as many questions as the gentleman from Charlottesville would like to ask.
I don't believe I'll be saying.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, within the bill, it says that you can't have any policy that requires an employer within the locality to provide an employee with a wage or benefit that exceeds requirement of state and federal law. What if the employer is outside the locality?
What if the employer is outside the locality?
Yeah,
I'm not sure I understand the gentleman's question.
I'm happy to repeat it.
Please.
Has floor.
Speaker, the bill says that a locality can adopt an ordinance that requires an employer within the locality to provide an employee with a wage or employment benefit that exceeds. So what if the employer is outside of the locality?
Mr. Speaker, I would believe that if he wants to add a friendly amendment, I'd be happy to take that. But what I would say, Mr. Speaker, is that if the employer is doing business within the locality, I believe that would apply, that the work being done within that locality is how that is addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill at the appropriate time.
Gentleman has floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is popular legislation. We like to go after the localities who want to have their own policies on certain things. But, this, again, is an effort by this state to take away the flexibility of localities to tailor their employment contracts and their contracting with people who provide services to the locality in a way that best suits that locality. If a locality, city council, or board of supervisors wants to have a policy that says we want to have higher wages so that people can pay enough, get enough so that they can afford to support their family, and the taxpayers in that locality say it's okay, then why shouldn't we let them? So, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I hope you will fail to engross the bill.
The gentleman from Virginia Beach, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. I think there may be a little bit of confusion on the other side of the aisle. This is not my bill, as y'all have heard in the prior 2 years. That's actually coming next week. This is a bill that prevents Virginia from allowing Virginia Beach to do what Seattle's done. It prevents the locality from saying the minimum wage that needs to be paid for all employers in the locality has to be X. $15 an hour, $12 an hour, whatever the case is. It's a bill that prevents the loss of jobs. We've all read the articles. I hear some people on the other side talk about we've increased the minimum wage before, nothing ever happened. Well, you're right, it wasn't that bad, but technology wasn't where it's at today. Open up any paper and see what McDonald's have done out in Seattle. Look at all the new technology that's come around and replaced labor. And the reason that escalated is we raised the cost artificially of labor so much that it went above the cost of the technology to replace it. So what we want to do in Virginia is protect that from happening and be enforced upon businesses by local governments. It has nothing to do with local governments giving a local business a contract. Like I said, we'll debate that next week. This just stops us from being Seattle and having all the problems Seattle's now experiencing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Botetourt, Mr. Head.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In building on what Delegate Davis just said, another thing that we've got to be considering here is employers that may be providing services in various localities around. If you've got one locality requiring one wage mandate and another locality requiring another wage mandate, it becomes extraordinarily difficult for the employer to do business. It causes tremendous problems. We've got to have one level playing field as one Commonwealth of Virginia. And because of that, we don't need to confuse things. The wages that are paid to employees has to be driven by the market, and that will continue to be driven by the market. If it needs to be higher, as in the case with my own company, I pay way above minimum wage because I want to have good employees. But if I have to start calculating out what I had to do locality to locality to locality, it would become almost impossible to continue to grow. And so because of that, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the body to engross the bill.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Bill is engrossed and passed to its